There's these three ways to the one way of Christian perfection, and they're called the purgative way, the illuminative way, and the unitive way. And levels 1 through 4 of prayer more or less map to that purgative way. Certainly the active purgation process, where you yourself are putting in the effort and making this happen. But then there comes a point where you hit the ceiling and you can't do it anymore. Like, you can come to a point where you are so close with eliminating not only the mortal sins, but even the venial sins. And by the way, what comes after cleaning up venial sin is imperfections, right? There's levels to this. But there comes a point where, because of original sin, we are corrupted so much. Like, we have ignorance in that faculty of intellect. We have malice in that faculty of will. We have weakness in that faculty, in that irascible faculty where we're supposed to have the strength of fortitude. And we have concupiscence and our concupiscible appetites, this inclination to have an inordinate relationship to pleasure, right? Food, touch, things like this. And God needs to come into our souls and clean us up. And that's what happens with especially levels 5 through 8 of prayer, and really in 5 and 6. You start to kind of blend into what's called the passive purgation or purification process, where you are just receiving a cleansing from the Lord, and then also entering into what's known as the illuminative way, as I have mentioned. This is the part in a soul's journey where they have to get a spiritual director, because there's a certain amount of spiritual blindness that comes with this part of life, where you need somebody who knows what they're doing to kind of help you, figure out what's going on and where you need to go next. Someone with a spiritual flashlight. So when you start entering into level 5 of prayer, which is mystical contemplation, you start the process of that receiving from the Lord. So what does that look like? What it looks like is God infuses his grace into our souls. And our responsibility is to lean on all of the training that we had received with how to exercise levels 1 through 4 of prayer, right? We've hopefully more or less mastered those. And in the natural order of things, it is a progression. It's linear. Although you can't put God in a box, and sometimes he jumps around on the map temporarily for certain souls. But as you have progressed, your faculties are subordinated enough so that you can start to receive these mystical experiences from God. Now, if I'm starting to sound a little weird to some of you guys, I've got news for you. We're all supposed to be mystics. That's actually the Catholic teaching. And that's another thing that for some reason there's like a knowledge gap somewhere in the history of the church where we don't seem to understand that. Although it's not totally our fault, so let me give you a little history lesson for a second. In the beginning, I had mentioned to you St. Francis de Sales, who's the doctor of the laity. He also lived in the 1500s, like St. Teresa of Avila. And when he hit the scene, he actually really advocated. He got his name because, as a doctor, because he advocated on behalf of the laity, big time. He was a dense theologian who really knew his stuff, but he had the ability to, just connect with everybody and help them to understand some of these realities. And Francis de Sales was kind of the one who popularized fighting this heretical notion where, there was like kind of like a form of clericalism where certain members of the hierarchy at the time were stating that levels 1 through 4 of prayer are only for the laity, but levels 5 through 9 of prayer are only for the clergy. Like, only laity get to be ascetic. Laity only get to be ascetics, but the more mystical stuff is for those with holy orders. Francis de Sales said, "Nuh-uh, that is not the case. All 9 levels of prayer are available for everybody. And in fact, you kind of need that, because if you're going to fulfill that precept of Matthew 5:48, to be ye perfect, even as my Father in heaven is perfect. The effective consummation of living out that gospel precept, that command, is to be in the 9th level of prayer. So how does that work if only clergy get to do that, right? So Francis de Sales, he fought well in his day, preaching the truth, and it continued down the centuries from the 1500s to present day, where theologians debated and mystical writers and back and forth on this subject, where finally it was settled in the Second Vatican Council. When the Second Vatican Council declared the universal call to holiness, what it was actually doing with that statement was it was settling that centuries-long debate. And it was stating once and for all that the 9 levels of prayer are for everybody. And it's not just a polite suggestion, it's our duty, it's our responsibility.